Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome everybody. I'm seeing names coming through right now. I'm seeing Marcia and Ahmed. I'm seeing Jerry and Alicia. I'm seeing Geraldine, and there's a whole bunch I'm not seeing right now. Here you start to come as we start to partition back into the room. I welcome everybody here today. Good. I'll give you a few more seconds for everyone to transition through. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Debbie and Jacoya and Marcia. And man, good afternoon. I'll give you about another 10 seconds, and we'll start get going. Good afternoon, April. Good afternoon. Ah, how are you? All right. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today for another session in our Level Up program. This Level Up program is focused on as a focus series which has provided insight, knowledge, and resources for our Black-led businesses. But before we jump into the program, I will first want to acknowledge everyone here, tell you some of the ground rules, and then I'm going to go into land acknowledge and legal disclaimer. On the bottom of your screen, you're going to see what's a chat function. We're going to go through first. We're going to go through the presentation, of which will be uninterrupted. And then we'll go to an ask a question functionality, where I will be sitting down and engaging our speaker for today. At that time, what you can do is, if you have any questions during this presentation, just write them down or think of them, and you can either write them in the chat, you can raise your hand, and I can either bring you in to ask a question yourself, or you can put it in the chat and I'll ask questions for you. So I'll be asking questions, but again, this is an interactive for us as a community to learn, understand, and grow. All right, so that's on the bottom of your screen. Now, with that said, let's jump right into our program but let's start off by going through our legal disclaimer and our land acknowledgement. So the Black Business Professional Association acknowledges that we're on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Onondaga, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The BBPA acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with Mississaugas of the Credit, the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississauga and Chippewa bands. In terms of our legal disclaimer, the ideas, strategies discussed in this program are general in nature and should not be considered advice specific to any individual. They are designed to communicate the basic information to help participants understand the basics of the topic presented. The materials neither purport nor intend to give any financial, legal, or tax advice, or any earnings expectations. Nothing in this program should be considered investment or financial advice. For financial, legal, or other investment advice, you should seek that advice from your own trusted independent financial legal advisor, or consult with a qualified advisor prior to acting with regards to the ideas presented in this program. The opinions rendered in this program are those of the presenter and does not necessarily represent those of the BBPA, RBC, HSBC, the Donald Reed, or any of others of our sponsors. Now, with that said, good afternoon, everybody, again. Thank you for joining us today for another session in our Level Up program. I'm your host. I'm Anton James. I'm a marketing and strategy consultant and an event host and moderator. Today's program is one of many programs brought to you by the Black Business Professional Association, which has made significant efforts to understand, respond, and provide services and resources to support our community and their business growth. Specifically, we are in the Level Up program, which is a 13-week program designed to be a finance and funding masterclass for Black-led businesses. So whether you're a startup or you're an established business, this program seeks to help by providing you the key information from industry experts regarding fundamental business considerations to help companies scale and grow. Today's program will focus on keeping it liquid, approaches to managing cash flow, inventory, and debt, and how business themselves can grow and thrive. However, I would like to sit down there. And before I go into that, I want to talk to you a little bit about it before I introduce who our speaker of the day is. Stepping back, the BBPA has made special efforts. So, what is this program we're actually in right now? For those who join us for the first time or have gone through guests, it is a program that's taking our constituents from the cradle to the grave and understanding how to set up, establish, and thrive a business. So, the first couple of weeks, what we did was we said, okay, you know what? Let's help an organization or a business understand the business landscape, the economy. Is it right to set up a business now? What are the fundamental considerations? Of which we started off, we talked to the head economist for HSBC. Then we pivoted and then we brought in the governor general, deputy governor general of the Bank of Canada. Then we talked about what type of business structures how do you structure your business? Is it in corporations? Is it a partnership? We talked about things such as tax implications. We talked about things such as how do you apply for federal governments grants? How do you set up so you can apply for businesses, apply for loans? What are the considerations? How do you structure? And so what we're really doing is taking from cradle all the way to the grave on how we as businesses can thrive and grow. Today, where it's another pivot of that, we sat down there and we sought your feedback because this is a program set up for us, by us, to help us. And today we're really helping to say, okay, here's some of the challenges that we as a community have. Here's are some of the things that we can do, and here's some of the things that actually help. Today we are pleased, and I'm very pleased to sit down there and have the opportunity to welcome Gareth De Silva. I'm going to talk about him specifically because today, Gareth, and who is Gareth? First of all, welcome, Gareth. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Thanks so much.
Fabulous. So let me tell you who Gareth is. Gareth De Silva is the Vice President of Commercial Finance Services for the RBC. With over 17 years of experience in financial services with RBC, Gareth manages a team of 14 mobile account managers across the East Toronto region. This team provides holistic solutions and strategic advice to business owners. Gareth's previous roles with RBCs include senior commercial banker, a business account manager with an expertise in credit underwriting and structuring. He's involved with community mentorship programs, providing resources to individuals interested in starting a business. So, without further ado, I want to introduce Gareth and give him an opportunity to give his presentation. Following his presentation, then we'll proceed into question and answer where we can have an interactive session with him. With that said, Gareth, over to you.
Thank you so much, Anton. So pleased to be joining today and speaking with you all. I think that some of the content I'm going to go through today, super important and relevant, given the times that we're in. Facing COVID and challenges, and just some of the things that we're talking to a lot of our business owner clients about. Cash flow. Cash flow is so key and important as it relates to you as a business owner, or for those here that are thinking about starting up a business. Our perspective in terms of what I'm going to share will really drill a little bit down into some of the fundamentals to consider when thinking about cash flow for your business. So maybe we can get the presentation started, and I can start by going through some of this info. Okay, so keeping it liquid, approaches to managing cash flow, inventory, and debt. So if we can just go to the next slide there. So why is managing cash flow so important? So, this is one of the most important aspects to every business. Healthy cash flow ensures that the business can pay expenses on time and have funds for growth and expansion. One really, common misconception is the difference between cash flow and profit. So let's talk a little bit about what the differences are. Sorry, if you can go back there. Yeah. So, profit is an indicator of the money left over in a business after all expenses have been paid, whereas cash flow indicates the net flow of cash in and out of a business. So I think that they're two very different things. And, cash flow, as we're going to go into this presentation, is extremely important in terms of, understanding those inflows and outflows to the business. The ability to manage cash flow is fundamental to your company's financial health. When you add in this health or global pandemic that we're currently facing and the impacts to businesses all around the world, the command on your working capital or cash flow just becomes that much more critical and considerably more difficult. Times are extremely tough right now, and many businesses will struggle to weather the storm. Having control over your cash and visibility of its future position can help you emerge from the crisis and move forward. So let's go to the next slide. So a good practice for those who have a business, or as you're starting to think, is assessing your cash flow position. Know where you stand. It's something that we give advice to our clients all the time, and we work with them in terms of understanding where they currently stand. Anytime your business faces a crisis, it's important to assess the impact of that situation as soon as possible and as comprehensively as possible. Think about your short and long-term cash position. In simple terms, your future cash position is an assessment of what you have today, plus what is expected to come in, less what you expected to go out. In ordinary times, predicting your cash flow is fairly straightforward. However, when you're being thrown into a situation like a global pandemic of economic uncertainty, that rhythm goes right out the window. Forecasting your cash flow long-term and short-term positions become more challenging. We can go to the next slide. The best way to get a sense of your future cash is to run a sensitivity analysis. So there's a lot of different ways to look at sensitivity analysis as it relates to cash flow. A nice little exercise that you can do is what we call what if planning. So what if planning, asking yourself questions such as, what if you can only collect existing receivables, but you don't add new revenue in the short term? When you think about what happened when the pandemic first hit, a lot of businesses were thinking about, okay, full shutdown, no revenue streams. What about those existing receivables that were owed to us as a business? Can we collect those? Focus on that. Another what if scenario, what if some of your receivables come in late or don't come in at all? What's your plan? You'll want to make some assumptions as to the number of months your business will be feeling the impact of COVID and what effect it will have ultimately on your long-term sales. We can go to the next. So just quickly to define a few concepts here as it relates to cash flow, the inflows and outflows. So let's talk about payables, which would be more considered a cash outflow. So your payables in terms of your suppliers, like your responsibility to pay suppliers, your other payables such as, staff, wages, rent, insurance, equipment leases. There's two things to really understand as it relates to your payables in an uncertain environment. You need to organize and prioritize. What are your priority payables versus some of the others? Your receivables. So that refers a little bit more to the inflows of cash into the business. Two potential impacts of COVID on your receivables. New sales may be harder to come by. Existing customers may be slower to pay. While you may already have a clear view of what is expected to come in, it is important to look at it with a lens of financial health of your actual clients. So thinking about who your clients are and what sort of challenges are they having during this pandemic when it comes to their cash flow will impact that money coming into your business. Okay. Supply chain. And I think that, you may have heard a lot of the supply chain disruptions that's happened over the last year because of COVID. Determine what impacts there may be to your ability to produce or purchase products. Will suppliers be able to deliver necessary items to manufacturers? Will manufacturers be able to maintain the productivity levels required to deliver goods to you? That supply chain really has an impact on your cash cycle, in terms of what you need to produce a good, whether it's, an actual manufactured good, or maybe if it's another type of good like a food or a service or something like that. So you really need to understand, the impacts of the supply chain with the pandemic in mind. You can go to the next slide. So 6 strategies to optimize your cash flow through COVID-19. I thought that these are some great sort of strategies to implement and consider. Once you've done your assessment on the impact of the pandemic on your business and know where you stand, consider these actions to help control your cash flow and flow over funds in and out of your company. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about number 1, regularly monitor and forecast your cash flow. So this is one thing I think that, in I guess a normal environment where things are going really well, um, and then suddenly moving to a more regular exercise or routine of monitoring your cash flow, that's been a big adjustment for many business owners. I still feel that, regardless of the pandemic, it's just a great sort of practice to regularly monitor and forecast your cash flow regardless. But more than ever, you always need to be reviewing your cash flow. That means daily monitoring of cash balances and reconciliation with your accounting software. It's a good idea to implement a cash flow forecasting process to help drive your short-term decisions as it relates to payables, receivables, and inventory. So, these are some of the things that, that sort of daily reconciliation, the daily monitoring, it seems cumbersome, and, business owners are extremely busy, and, I'm assuming with all different types of things, this sort of accounting function or this monitoring can be a little bit overwhelming. So the question is it something that you can do yourself as a business owner? Is there someone else in the organization that, has a dedicated role to do this type of monitoring and forecasting? Are you working with a professional or a partner? Do you have an accountant or a bookkeeper that can help work with some of this reconciliation? So those are things to consider. We can move on to the next, please. So number 2, digitizing your payments. So this is a big one that we're seeing in the last year, a big movement to digitizing operations for business owners. Offering digital payment methods can help you get funds into your business faster. Credit and debit card payments, for example, if you're receiving Interact e-transfer transactions. Mobile payment options to enable you to speed up that payment or that cash, that receivable turning into cash. That's essentially, one of the things that are really going to help with your cash cycle. So digital payment options also minimize fraud and make reconciling your accounts faster and easier. You'll have a digital record to help with your reconciliation. The point about fraud is very relevant too, right? You're seeing, or at least with manual payment options, let's say, writing checks or receiving checks, receiving cash, there's all types of risks associated with those types of payment options. We can go on to the next, please. Okay, so the third here, number 3, optimize your payables. So let's talk about some of the priority payables, such as, let's say, payroll. Employee wages and benefits deserve the most attention from you right now as a business owner. Your top priority is to take care of your people and your community. So it's worth exploring options that can help you to avoid layoffs. So, that's something that, in terms of understanding some of the priority payables or priorities for your organization. Electronic payments is another way. So moving back to the digitizing, but now applying it more to your payables. If you can pay your suppliers or vendors or taxes by electronic means, you need to have cash in hand only at the moment of payment, not before. So once again, just streamlines operations and makes things a little bit easier. And then, of course, that idea of prioritization and deferment. As you evaluate the payments you need to make, determine which suppliers are mission critical to the success of your business and reach out to them first. Many businesses are in the same boat, so your suppliers are likely hungry for cash as well. Discuss the opportunity for partial payments or dynamic discounting if you can pay on time. Explore options for deferred payments and see if you can work out payment plans that work for everyone. Keep in mind, your relationships that you have with your supplier are extremely important right now, and the trust you have built up with them will go a long way. So yeah, I think it just really speaks a little bit more about the importance of the relationship that you have with your suppliers, and maybe the ability to have those conversations. If you need more time to make payments, is there a willingness there? Who are your priority suppliers? Things like that you really need to think about more long-term. Okay, you can go to the next, please. Number 4, so proactively manage your receivables, and your receivables would be that inflow of cash. As you evaluate money that's due to come in, it's important to proactively engage with your customers to find out how they're doing and how likely they are able to pay on time. Be sure to prioritize customers with large balances and work together to build a payment plan that is achievable for them. So keeping in mind that your customers could also be businesses themselves, or let's say they're direct consumers who are also having cash flow challenges with the pandemic or whatever that might be. Being able to work with them to ultimately get that sort of payment plan in so that it turns from a receivable to cash is very, very important. So consider offering discounts for shorter payment terms, partial payments, or real-time payments, such as credit cards or e-transfer transactions. Regularly monitor outstanding accounts and help eliminate surprises. Keep cash coming in faster and take action on balances that slide past their due dates. And that's a common one that we're seeing very, very frequently, is that offering discounts for electronic payments versus some of the more traditional payments that could take a little bit more time to come into the business. All right, let's go to the next, please. So we're already on number 5. So get creative with your inventory. And I think that, for businesses that have inventory on their balance sheet and, carry an inventory balance, this is something that's really important, because ultimately that inventory cycle in terms of converting that inventory into a sale and then into cash becomes very, very important in the cash cycle. So many industries are experiencing that supply chain disruption that we talked about previously. It's more vital than ever to know what you have in stock. Increasing the frequency of your inventory counts could help you understand what materials are running low so you can quickly reorder. Get an understanding of what's moving out and what's not. Customer needs have changed so dramatically during this time. So if you're running low on one area, if the demand isn't there, it's worth focusing on materials that are currently more sought after. Get creative. There have been stories of breweries and perfumery, I'm sure you all read about it, pivoting to create hand sanitizers, and clothing companies making masks and closing gowns, PPE gear. Consider how you may be able to make business in ways you may never considered before. Okay, on to the next, please. And the last one that we're going to talk about is managing debt and exploring government assistance. So during this pandemic, the federal and provincial governments have highlighted the need to support businesses in Canada, recognizing businesses like yours are the lifeblood of the country. Government has developed a number of initiatives designed to help owners keep the lights on. So you may have heard of many of the various programs out there, such as CEBA, more recently something called HASCAP. There's a link at the bottom here on this slide to give you a little bit more insight of some of the various resources. Some of the short-term impacts of the pandemic may have impacted cash flow. That's what these resources are there for, so that you can get up and running and adapt to really focusing on consistent cash flow in the business, let's say after that adaptation takes place. Another thing to consider when it comes to managing existing debt: reviewing the terms of your let's say loans, or amortization of your loans, meaning the length. That can be really key to cash flow. Do the payments work for you, like in terms of what you were paying before versus now? Are they working with your anticipated forecasts? You can potentially discuss options of extending amortizations or looking at different sort of loan plans with your banking advisor. So these are all things to consider. And I think, one of the key fundamentals when looking at debt as it relates to cash flow is it is a cash outflow, right? Loan payments. So it's a good thing to understand as you're analyzing your cash flow and doing forecasts. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it in terms of what I wanted to go through. I just wanted to open up the questions and comments, if that's possible. Oh, I think you're on mute there, Anton. Oh.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you clear now.
So sorry about that. Gareth, thank you for that information you shared. And for sure, I want to start going through some questions again. Before I do so, ground rules for those, as a quick reminder, For anyone that has questions, again, on the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a chat functionality. That if you have questions, that you can either type it in the chat room itself, or you can raise your hand. And what I will do, I'll pivot and allow you to ask a question, or I can ask a question on your behalf. This is meant to be an interactive point where we actually have have the opportunity to actually ask Gareth. Well, let's circle back and start it off. So, Gareth, first, thank you for the presentation. We definitely appreciate the information. Give us some understanding. Let's go back and set the, just a landscape and an environment. What are some of the most common practices that businesses are doing today to manage their cash flow?
So, I would say that the biggest thing that I've seen over the last year with the pandemic is that movement to digitize operations. And I think that it's almost like a situation where we've had these conversations with clients well before the pandemic in terms of how they ran things in terms of operations and some of the benefits of digitizing. We talked about reduced fraud, efficiency. And when something simple like the pandemic hits and banks themselves are closed for companies and business owners that actually transacted in branches, I think that they're almost forced to start digitizing. So we're seeing that movement of digitizing, and I think ultimately what happens is that it becomes a lot more efficient and effective in terms of collecting inflows and then also sending payments out. So we're seeing a great sort of understanding of those impacts with some of our business owners from an efficiency standpoint, and that makes just things that much easier for them to analyze their cash flow.
Okay. Oh, all right. I was going to go into talk about the difference of COVID, but I have a question that's coming in from Annie.
Sure.
What is the best tool or software to keep track of your cash flow?
You know what? There's quite a few different resources available. So even like simple sort of accounting softwares, like everyone's heard of things like QuickBooks. They have functions. You can get very professional depending on if you have your own sort of accounting firm that's working with your business that have more sophisticated models. I can talk a little bit about RBC. Like we actually have a cash flow tool online that's meant for anyone publicly to access for a business owner. And you can kind of start playing around with it and understanding, hey, here's how you can calculate your cash flows and inflows. So there's a lot of different resources. And like I said, I can speak specifically about some of the stuff that we have available to business owners, but it can get very deep. And like I said, it really depends on where your business is at and what sort of level of detail.
Okay, fair enough. Let me ask you. So a lot of stuff you're talking about right now, you said you mentioned before, but have you seen a significant change since COVID lockdown started?
In terms of what? In terms of cash flow or
Well, in
what?
terms of cash flow challenges
Yeah.
or solutions to those cash flow challenges, whereas before maybe they were more reluctant or that they everybody wants to pivot
Yeah.
now or
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, that's a really good point. There absolutely is a little bit of a difference, like in terms of number one, the way that business owners are thinking about their business. When we're having conversations and looking to partner with a business, let's say for credit as an example, the level of detail that's being provided by the owners in terms of how we're going to adapt and what's being considered, I think that is a whole other layer. And I think from the bank's perspective, like from a bank, we really want to understand, are you setting yourself up for success? Is this the right time for you to start a business, right? What are the impacts of like a global pandemic, like a COVID? Like certain industries obviously are impacted very differently. And I think that, I think the understanding of how to be successful in this environment is coming very, very clearly from those owners who are really serious about continuing on or even starting a business up.
okay, fair.
Yeah.
Let's change up a bit. Can you speak to any considerations or any stats that may be available as it relates to pivoting to this digital realm? Are,
Yeah, I would like to say that I don't have any specific statistics other than what we are seeing. I mean, I could tell you that right now, like at RBC, we have a really cool online platform. It's almost like online banking on steroids is what I call it for business owners, and the enrollment level has been just jumped through the roof, right? And I can kind of speak to that in terms of what we're seeing, just getting clients on, and some of the things that business owners that were doing in branches, like regular transactions, like wire transfers and things like that. and they just didn't have the chance to do it just because of the lockdown, or for their own safety, for everyone's safety. We got them going onto these platforms. So, we're seeing the trends probably more within RBC itself, but I think that, it kind of speaks to what others are doing too in the market.
Okay. Well, so when you talk about those trends, um, have you found that are there certain trends that are more specific to the Black community itself, or in terms of things that they're doing or they're not doing?
I wouldn't say it's specific to that. I know this is kind of more for, ultimately with business owners. Now, with that said, like we do see different concentrations in certain communities. Are there more, in the startup phase of their business?
Mhm.
And for those that are more in the startup phase of their business, some of these trends, it takes a little bit of time as they establish things in terms of understanding, who are your customers, can they pay this way or not? Those are the types of things that we see. I would also say like more industry specific, like related to like retail, uh, shops and restaurants that, they can really accept like digital means like Visa card taps and stuff like that. That we're seeing a little bit more frequently for the safety of like, hey, you don't want people touching cash, or we want to make sure we accept electronic payments. So we're seeing that more, I would say, on an industry level, like in terms of differences.
Okay. So when you talk about industry level and seeing things are different, um, how do businesses overcome, you know, even let's look at an example. How do businesses overcome some of these challenges? Whereas if their businesses don't want to, go to tap, how do they overcome and even say, okay, let me embrace the thought of doing it, or how do we access the ability or the knowledge to do it? What would you advise? Like how what direction would you give?
Yeah, you're seeing that sort of adaptation and, word of mouth through communities like, business owner communities, things that are working through advice from advisors such as their bankers or other advisors that are within their team. Um, and I think ultimately at the end of the day, the consumers also drive this, right?
Mhm.
As a consumer, going into a store, that maybe would have a little bit of an issue right now, handling cash as an example. It could be something that, that consumer now chooses a store where there's like some sort of a digital payment option, right? So, you're looking at all these variables. And I think that at the end of the day, it's all about that adaptation, right? So it goes with anything, whether it's a pandemic or not. If we don't adapt, then, unfortunately, you sort of get left behind a bit, right? So I think that's very top of mind.
No, I definitely agree with you that adaptation is the key. But some people aren't adapting because they don't know how to.
Yeah.
Um, what would you advise, or what have you seen, or have you seen this happening? And if so, what do you advise those clients?
So I think that, that's part of our job as advisors to business owners, is that we need to make sure that we're constantly bringing them up to date info, trends, and industry insights. So I think that, for sure that channel of having an advisor or group of advisors is going to be extremely important uh, for any business owner. And sometimes that advice comes from another professional, let's say like their bookkeeper or accountant, or let's say a consultant. But I would say that, for me and my team, one of the things that we pride ourselves with is that, if a client says to us, well, I'm not too sure, this is the way things need to be done because they've always been done this way. Well, here are the options and here's why, right? Here's what we're seeing, here's what the data sort of telling us, and here's why. So, speaking of data, and I know that you talked about that, very great sort of resources like something called like a vertical IQ gets little industry data all over all over the geography and gives you a little bit of insights based on industry. And we use that very frequently to help advise our clients to certain trends.
I actually like that. I want to go into the advisory side, but before I do,
Sure.
for you've mentioned data is a key portion of it, and it absolutely is. So let me ask you this: can you share any matrices that a business owner can look at to understand, how relevant am I right now? What, you know, am I in line with industry? Am I behind? Do I need to move? Is there any matrix that you can share?
I would point you to two really great sort of resources where data is available like that. So there's a great sort of resource. Once again, I mentioned it, called Vertical IQ. which is broken down based on industry trends in terms of geographies that can give you that type of data. Another one that's really good is called IBIS World. So IBIS World. Once
Oh, good.
again,
Say it again. Say it, slow down, slow down. It's what?
IBIS
IBIS.
World.
Okay.
Yeah. And that one's really nice because there's a specific focus on Canada, whereas a lot of these sort of industry data resources tend to be more, North America based, whereas IBIS is focuses it on a little bit more on Canada too. So great sort of understanding of what's going on. What's interesting is that, so some of the business account managers and commercial account managers that are on my team, we're managing multiple businesses, right? So it's great. Like, so sometimes, you'll have, let's say, a portfolio of 30 different restaurants, and we have one restaurant owner, for example, that just does things a certain way. And then we have others. So, that's another key point in terms of what that advisor is bringing to the table. That's something that we try to pride ourselves with, right? Is just trying to give, some more micro information in terms of what we're seeing and what's working with others versus, let's say, somebody who isn't, right, doing so well or having a struggle with adaptation.
Perfect.
Mhm.
I want to pivot to the advisor, but before I do, I see a question coming
Sure.
in from Beverly M. What have you seen the trend to be for personal service businesses like barbers and beauty salons who have been shut down since November 2020?
Yeah, you know what? That is a very, very difficult sort of industry, obviously. And, kudos to those business owners because I think that, obviously they faced some very, very challenging times with some of these shutdowns. And, it's not just them. Obviously, there's some other businesses that go to a situation of zero revenue with some of the lockdowns in place. So, what I would say is that, those are the highly impacted industries that can absolutely benefit from some of the government relief programs. What is the insight though? I think that, a lot of the insight tends to be that, it's a business that has been significantly impacted, but we hope and we think that it's going to go back to normal when things start opening up. The challenge is that, as it relates to cash flow, is that how long can you kind of sustain that as the business owner? You have expenses to pay. You have to make very difficult decisions, like whether you have employees or not, and what you do on that front. And you have, an actual premises to lease or pay rent for. So, that's really where I would say the government programs come in place. It is, these are industries that, like I said, if things go back to normal, or if they do pre-COVID or whatever it looks like, expected to recover. And I think that's a lot of what the data is saying. Yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha. All right, I want to turn a little bit and circle back to what we referenced earlier on. It's
Mhm.
kind of I had a question, but um, Debbie S also kind of had the same question. So let me read her question. It was, as a startup, what's your advice on how to build a circle of trusted advisors? How can you start building and connecting with these experts during COVID?
So yeah, I think everything is obviously changed because of COVID. So it seems a little bit more challenging to make those connections. I would say that from an advisor standpoint with the bank, definitely through digital means and digital channels. We're struggling too. We really miss that face-to-face interaction with our clients too, but that is absolutely an option in terms of virtually connecting with your banking advisors from one standpoint. The more people that you can surround yourself with from an advisory standpoint is going to be key. And for someone who's thinking of starting up a business, the more preparation that you put into it, the more chances for success to make sure you're going into the right areas. So other things like such as networking groups, I think are very, very good out there, like, business owner networking groups. You kind of get looped into based on communities. We work very closely, my team and I, with the Scarborough Business Association as an example. And within those associations are not just business owners, there's multiple professionals, right? Whether they're consultants or accountants, and other resources that are not necessarily costly, that don't cost anything, right? It's just more of a matter of understanding. I really think that there's powerful um, sort of search engines out there, really simply kind of plugging it in to see what's in the neighborhood and the community to understand what resources are available. And then, every major financial institution obviously has a business banking arm, right? So that type of advice coming from your business bankers can be very, very key just to help you prepare for, let's say, ultimately you moving towards that dream of starting your own business.
Perfect. You know what I want to do? I thank you for that, but I want to break it down a little bit more because in today's audience, we have a mix of those that are looking to start and those that are established. And there's still going to be a span or a band of understanding of even what should be in that advisory team. So give
Sure.
us, give them a team of what their advisory team should look like. There's one thing is, yeah, your banking team, that's great. But
Yeah.
what else should they consider? Who else should be in there and why?
So I think a key one, it definitely starts number one with the business owner at the center, right? That's what I think is really important. And the business owner at the center, the one who has the idea, who has the creativity, and is the entrepreneur, really drives exactly how they want to put their thoughts on paper and ultimately get their dream to a reality. Now, in addition to that, as you start going through some of the motions in terms of starting your business up, if that business requires financing to get it started, and there's a really great program out there called the Canada Small Business Financing Program. To get that going in terms of getting some loans for, let's say, equipment or to renovate the premises that you're going to occupy, for example.
I'm gonna
You know,
stop you here because I want to go into that in detail, but
okay,
I don't want to get to that right now though, because I want to. The challenge oftentimes is not that people don't necessarily they don't have the keys for success. They just don't know how to properly deploy. So I want to focus right now on the advisory portion because
that's
that's coming next. We're going to
right.
the credit, then we're going to go into what are the programs.
Sure. So I mean, like I said, with the business owner at the center,
Yeah,
there are groups that will work as consultants to help with that initial
yeah,
business plan. So I think the business plan is really key. How do you create that business plan?
yeah.
So whether you're choosing an accountant or a consultant to do that, that's a paid for service.
Okay.
Or, like I said, with the business owner at the center, if you're savvy enough,
Mm-hmm.
business plans, once again, even available through RBC's public website, are available for you to work with on your own.
So there's public
So
websites. There's on so if they go to your site and they can see some access resources there, they can hire consultants or accountants. Okay. What else?
that's a good one. So the other one would also be, I mean, typically has always been like when you get your business registered, you need a lawyer, right? Is that another professional that can help you? And aside from that, and the cost associated with a lawyer and that type of legal advice when it comes to the corporate structure, that could be one. But there's also other organizations out there that will do business registration for you if you know what you have in mind. Like, let's say, a corporation doesn't necessarily have to be a lawyer. So I think that's another aspect. And then the third one, I'm gonna loop back to your banker, right? So the banking professional that really helps you establish your accounts for your operating business and can help guide you in terms of preparation of what's needed or required. Let's say if there is a credit application that comes down the pipeline, bringing you resources such as digital, payment options, should that be something that would fit for the business at the onset, or bringing you resources and information about the various programs that would be in place. Let's say if there's a loan that you want to consider. So I kind of look at those three in particular, and I think that those are three good ones to kind of consider.
Love it, love it.
Yeah,
Now let's pivot now because now we want to
sure,
go into the credit side.
sure,
Because we saw the landscape, we saw some of the challenges, but on the credit, let's educate our audience here.
sure.
Let's talk about what are the types of credit,
Yeah.
what are the advantage of each type of credit,
Mhm.
what's an ideal combination for businesses, and what's the qualification for each of these types.
So it varies, and I would say that, like, from the startup business phase, and we can talk a little bit more about that. Um, the credit is very different. The credit process is very different than on the personal side of banking. So a lot of people may be more familiarized with, hey, this is how personal credit may look like, or what it may look like to qualify for that. But I think for business credit, we really do rely a lot on information such as things like financial statements, financial projections, things like cash flow cycles, and we talked a little bit about that today. What does the inflow and the outflow of cash into the business look like? So depending on the industry, I'll give you an example of a restaurant. So a restaurant, for example, to start that type of business up, you're likely going to need some equipment, right, to get that going. And the space that it occupies you're likely going to need to make sure that space is renovated to a certain standard, right? Whether there's, in-house dining or it's delivery, those are the types of things. So, there's a great program available called the Canadian Small Business Financing Program, which is an ideal type of financing solution where the government would come in and provide a guarantee to the bank. And,
Again, I tell you, I love it. We're going there. We're going there,
yeah,
but let's not
yeah,
the present too
yeah,
early. Keep going through.
yeah. So anyways, so that would be more applicable, like that type of financing product, which would be like what we call a term loan. So like there's a loan that you take to pay for that and you pay it back over a 5-year period.
Yeah.
Now, a business like that, let's like shift to another type of business. Let's say a business that manufactures soap, does something like a small business that manufactures soap or a product like that. They may need some inventory to convert that inventory into to actual finished good, like raw materials or whatnot. And maybe they're selling their goods to, let's say, a department store that doesn't pay them immediately, right? It pays them, 30 days from today. So something like a line of credit would be the more appropriate type of financing for them, because there's a point in time where they're paying their suppliers and they're waiting for their customers to pay them. So during that gap, right, where's their cash? That's where a line of credit comes into play to help bridge that gap, right? So different types of solutions depending on the type of industry and business and model.
Perfect. And what about things such as overdraft? Should that be something that is considered or not really? You advise not? What's your thoughts about that?
Well, yeah, so overdraft is absolutely something, right? And I think that, probably in business banking, like that's where the line of credit or the operating line of credit, as we call it, come into play, right? Very similar to like what an overdraft is, to bridge that gap when there's outflow of cash and the inflow just hasn't come in yet.
Okay. So now you gave us some good examples. What I want to do, I want to walk through the very simple case for a startup and established. So let's go through. You gave reference to it earlier on. If
Sure.
someone say they're an established business and they're making $100,000 in revenue, what is
Yeah.
a realistic potential they should be looking for credit options should they consider? Is there a certain amount of revenue to or sales to revenue limit? If they make 100,000, they can apply for $100,000 of credit or 10,000, or give us some understanding there.
Yeah. So I think like, let's say $100,000 business that does that in revenue, let's start from some of the more basic credit facilities that they would likely want. And I think that regardless of business size, things that would help the business owner make purchases. So like even like a Visa card, like a business Visa card, that seems to be a very um, logistic sort of starting point, just to make sure that you're doing or having your expenses separated maybe from your personal. So that's one piece. Starting to get into things like credit lines or operating lines of credit, that's going to depend on whether that $100,000 business, what sort of payment terms they extend to their customers, right? So we talked about, the restaurant. So a restaurant, for example, gets payment on the spot. So, they get the payment in and it goes right into their bank account. Whereas, let's say a soap manufacturer, as an example, may have to wait 30 days before their payment comes in, the goods are delivered. So that's the one that may need a line of credit. Now, would they need a $100,000 line of credit? We typically look at their cash cycle. This is why cash flow understanding is so important by the business owner and the banker to really size it up. A rule of thumb is that we tend to go up to, let's say, 20% of revenues on a maximum end.
20%.
So, could be up to a $20,000 line of credit that could be appropriate for that client. It could be more, it could be less. It really depends on the cash flow cycle.
Perfect. What advice would you give to someone looking to apply for credit? What advice would you give?
I think that the big thing here is that preparation piece, right? So I think that going into a credit application, especially for business loans, for on the startup side of things, it's very closely aligned to personal credit, like in the sense that the business is analyzed and then also personal is analyzed too. So we look at both sides of the equation. So so those are the types of things that you look for. And what can you say, like when it comes down to the business side of things, that business plan, what is it exactly that you're looking to accomplish? We look at things like when it comes to, management qualifications, like, are you qualified to manage that business effectively and make it successful? So those are the other things that you look at. So it really comes down to, Is that business plan well thought out? Is it relevant? Has the business owner addressed the risks associated with that business, right? As every business has a risk. And then, of course, understanding what it is that they're actually looking for from a loan perspective and why, right? Um, another thing that, another conception that's important is that we work in partnership with our business owners. So it's not only the bank lending money to the business at times to help, whether it's helping to grow the business, it's also the business owner themselves putting a lot of their own money into the business too. So there's a combination, right? It's never just like, hey, it's all going to be about taking on debt. It usually doesn't work that way. There's a combination between the business owner themselves putting money in and also the bank partnering and also helping out with credit facilities.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, so
Yeah.
now let's translate, and that's now I want to evolve because this is where the money really hits the road now. We talked about some of the challenges within the community. We talked about what's happening. We talked about some of the advice. Let's talk about giving some specifics as to some existing programs that could help. You were referencing some earlier.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So, I mean, I can reference quite a few, and I'll talk a little bit about, and as mentioned it before, the Canada Small Business Financing Program, the CSBFP. And you can go on, any Google search on the government website and understand the impact of that program for entrepreneurs, not just entrepreneurs that are looking to start a business, but when you look at the successful entrepreneurs that currently manage small to medium enterprises, majority of them started by leveraging and using this program. So basically, that's a great program where, the banks work jointly with the government because the intention is to, really stimulate the economy with, small businesses and continuing to have businesses start up. So that's a really impactful program. And I would say that, it's a good one to really discuss either with your banking advisor or do some research on it to understand a little bit more. We talked a little bit about the government relief programs related to COVID. So, there's a wide variety right now. They're constantly evolving. And, they're constantly changing given the changes that have happened with the pandemic, right? The last lockdown, for example, and then of course originally when the programs were originally launched. So those are ones to also set up and or to look at in more detail whether your business qualifies for one of those programs or not, because those become very, very important. I was going to talk a little bit about what might be coming soon in terms of the Black Entrepreneur Program.
Oh,
And
you're absolutely no. I was going to ask you on that. You know that.
yeah, and so that one, we're waiting and we're waiting to hear more and more info. We're very, very excited. Our clients are very excited about it, and I believe that it is going to be coming down the pipeline sooner than later. And this is a partnership between all the major financial institutions and the government to bring a little bit more detail of what that program looks like. I don't have all the answers right now, but that's something to keep a line of sight on as that progresses in the next couple months.
I think that's actually phenomenal. I just want to circle back just slightly because I
Sure.
want to make sure people understand that there is a small business loan that's available where the government actually guarantees up to 90%. Is that correct?
So that's right. Yeah, up to 90% is a
Up to
government guarantee.
90% of the loans. A lot of people, they don't ask because they're just not aware. So please
Right.
repeat that.
Yeah, so that's what they call the CSBFP. And once again, the government will come in and guarantee. Now, with that said, I always tell people
There's requirements,
if
obviously.
there are requirements, right? Like, I mean, the credit application itself does factor in, a lot more aligned to some of the personal aspects, such as, equity. And we look at, things like, your personal credit standing and of course your business plan in conjunction. The business plan is also very, very important to us just because, you want to make sure that you're aligning yourself to an industry that's doing well, that's growing, and that your experience coming in as a business owner is going to give everyone confidence that you're going to be successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, you've shared so many great insights here and some great knowledges. I'm going to ask you to do me one favor.
Sure.
Is there, because many people weren't able to write down as quickly as we were talking, can you share some resources that someone might be able to, resources, links, sites that people can access to see some of the places that you were referencing earlier on?
Yeah,
Ben, can you get
so
those up on the screen? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've sent Ben over a little bit of a slide at the end with some links and resources. I see some people asking for those resources.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
um, here's some great ones that I would say, take a look at. So resources from RBC. There's three that are great. That first one, the Small Business Navigator resource or website, can really talk people through various resources, whether it's business plans. You click on various links and understand what are the products and services that you may want to consider as a small business owner. But it's not just about products, it's also about things like business plans, other sort of calculators and tools. The second one from RBC is just more about some of the COVID relief programs, more broad information, so very thorough. We update that obviously daily. And the last one there's a cash flow tool. So that one I don't have I think it's it's probably also in the first link, you'll be able to find it, but what we talked about, analyzing cash flow, understanding your ins and outs. I wanted to include an update on the Black Entrepreneur Program from what's been
Yes.
posted on the government website. So take a look at that, right? So when you look at the government website, it does talk about that. It says coming in May. So I don't know if the timing is aligned or not. We don't know. I guess we're going to hear more, but just, it's a good one to save as a favorite, because I think that once that update starts coming up, it's a good one to check on. The Canada Small Business Financing Program that I talked about, once again, if you are an individual thinking about starting up a business, you need to familiarize yourself with this program. This really is something that is truly impactful. And start working with your advisors to understand, hey, can you qualify? Is this something that makes sense for the type of business you're looking to open? And then just some other sort of networking links there that I've mentioned, like meetup.com. I'm sure everyone has mentioned that. You can kind of understand the various networks in your community and area with a specific focus, whether it's small business, whether it's the Black community. All that stuff is in there. And I gave an example of the Scarborough Business Association, who we work very closely with, as another networking option.
That's absolutely phenomenal. Listen, so last question, if somebody wants to find out some more information, is there a contact information you'd like to share with the group that someone could find out more from, say, RBC?
Yes, I will. So on that first link,
Yeah.
You will find that you can call RBC. We actually have a team of business advisors. So a team of business advisors, I'm just going to give a link that will answer, questions, give you some insights, and some very good sort of professionals that we have, even in our call centers, that are trained. They know the programs, they understand, how to provide the advice and guide you. So that is great for everyone to sort of see. Let me just copy that right now, and maybe I'll just drop it into the chat here, if that's okay with you guys.
That'd be phenomenal.
Yeah. Let me
Again, part of the challenges that I've seen in the community is not necessarily they don't have the ability, they don't have the access, or the businesses, is they lack the knowledge and or access to those knowledges. So any information that we can share, any links to that, is phenomenal.
Yeah, so this link here will go through some of the business advice, very similar to the first link I shared. There's a 1-800 number that you can contact, get the information that you need, right? And I think that, what that team does, they do a great job of making sure that you're positioned with the right advisor. A lot of the time, they're able to field majority of questions or get you down the right path. But if that's not the case, they'll make sure that they get the right person involved.
Absolutely great.
Okay.
Well, I tell you this, Gareth, I really appreciate what you shared today. I think it's definitely helpful. As mentioned, I think that a lot of organizations would have found before haven't participated in some of these challenges because they didn't know. But with so, it's really going to be helpful to help them to thrive. Anyways, with that said, on behalf of the BBPA, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank you for working with us and sharing that information. Um, and you have definitely provided us not only information, but resources people can act on. And we appreciate that. For those that are also on there, I want to thank you for coming out today and on behalf of the BBPA. As mentioned before, for those that do not know, this is one of almost 20 programs being put on by the BBPA to support the community as we go through this transition. So on behalf of our sponsors, our RBC, one is Garrett's coming from, is HSBC, the Donald Reed Estates, not to mention a few others. We have other programs coming through as well. Also on Tuesday nights, we have what is called our This is a Level Up program, is the Boss Woman program being brought to you at 6 o'clock today. Follow up, and that's going to be a program catered on women entrepreneurs. We also have what is called our Ask the Professional series, which is on Wednesdays at 12 o'clock. And that's where we have interactive speeches, interactive discussions, a discussion basis where we understand some of the needs, from financial needs to social needs to health needs, to all aspects, to understand what exactly how our community moves forward. On the weekends, on Saturday, we have what's known as community space, which goes from 10:30 to 11 o'clock. And that particular program is focused on our youth in high school and university, and teaching them the fundamentals of finances so they understand how the system actually works, how to start getting involved in the young ages. We also have, following up, we have a series of programs. We have tax programs. We also have programs that are designed for business itself to help them that are going through. There's the BADES program. BADES program is helping, where the BBPA specifically are helping organizations in the community recognize what are their needs. They need their needs to success. They need help with setting up a website, or doing some taxes, or doing a business plan. We will help you. Not only will they help you, they'll pay for some of the programs. There is a lot of programs. The BBPA has made specific and targeted efforts to really help our community. So I thank you for coming out today. I thank you for continuing to join us. Later on next month, we have our Harry Jerome Awards coming through, which is, most people know, but for those that do not know, that is one of the most prestigious awards within our community itself. So I thank those for coming through. We continue to work together to move the whole organization and the community forward. For those that came, thank you very much. I will see you next Tuesday, coming to the same time, same bad place. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Thank you,
you.
man. I thank you, Gareth. You definitely provide some great information. Let me ask you, when you're engaging audiences, for anyone that's in the audience right now, you can take off your mic so you can come out directly. The show is now over, so we can interact directly. What do you find, like, when you're engaging business? Are you finding a lot of businesses are reaching out to you guys, or do you have to reach out more to them? What do you guys find? How are you finding it?
I think it's a combination, right? So like existing clients and whatnot, absolutely. But to your point, I think there is a need of being more proactive and kind of reaching out, because people want to know where these sort of resources or understand more. If you don't know, then how are you going to sort of progress, or how are you going to really build a plan, right? So I think that that's part of the reason why I feel it's important for my team to kind of be a little bit more proactive also in community functions, not just with individual clients. I mean, there's different types of things that we do, like with our existing client base, where they have that relationship, so it's very synergy, like the synergies there. But I think there's also that combination of doing more community focused things. Now, we used to do a lot of this, Anton, like I swear we used to do a lot of this within the branch network. So we used to go set up really great advice events to outreach to the community for anybody, RBC, non-RBC, in person. And I think that there's been a challenge. So we've been doing quite a few virtual ones out there in the market, trying to get the word out via social media, LinkedIn, and things of that nature. So we're trying to do as much. It's definitely not the same, but it's building, like, the capabilities of people to get online and do virtual events. I just think that's growing.
Perfect. As we're talking, Ben, can you do me a favor? Can you put the last page of links? People are asking for it. They want to see some of the links back on the screen. Thank you. So here's a question. Are you finding, again, I do consulting. Are you finding that even as you're doing that a lot of the patrons are within the Black community, or that they're not really accessing a lot of information? What are you finding?
I find that there's certain communities, and obviously we've been working a lot with the Black community to provide resources. And I would just say it really depends. Like, in Scarborough and the market that we work with, there's certain parts of the demographic of East Toronto where there's more concentration of certain communities, right?
Right.
And there's some very, very successful business owners in the Black community. Yes. In various parts. And I think that, trying to work with them a little bit more and understanding, where can this information really resonate in the community? I think that's really key. So we're doing quite a bit of that. We have a good client mix. And the one thing that you can appreciate is that living in Toronto, is, a lot of these startup entrepreneurs that come here, a lot of them are immigrants to Canada, right? So,
Right. Right.
and so you're seeing that from various communities in terms of coming in and trying to get established, try to start a business. I think some of the disconnects that you see is that to a certain degree, like the qualification standards to get, let's say, a CSBFP loan to start a business,
Yeah.
that's something that we're trying to make sure that we prepare clients from a very, very early stage. If they
Mm.
come into an office, or they're, let's say, personal banking clients, and they say to their personal banker, you know what, we're thinking about starting a business in the next couple of years, here's our idea. It's important for us to make sure that they're in front of the right advisor, just to at least get the conversation started. So I think that we can do a much better job of doing that. And sometimes that conversation is not necessarily had in a bank. I think it happens in the community, and maybe the community just doesn't know about the resources to bring to the table, right? To get them in the right direction.
Mm.
So yeah, so I think that that community outreach piece is going to be very, very key and important too.
No, and that's actually it. It's how to effectively build a community, share the knowledge, share the wealth, share the understanding.
Yeah,
Because ultimately, it's a win-win scenario, and that's what everyone's looking for, is the win-win scenario, and the not the skill set, but understanding the systems to do so. Because many, we just operate in different systems. Up
yeah,
until recently, many didn't know that their rent payments aren't considered part of their credit.
yeah.
Many didn't know that how to access. So, while you have the other spectrum where there's organizations doing, man, they're doing exceedingly well. And just how do we move forward?
Yeah, no, I think knowledge is so important, right? When it comes down to just making sure that everybody understands, what's out there and what's available. So, is it just like, let's say an advisor, like a banker or an accountant, to have that responsibility? For sure, that's part of what we do. But the more people within the community that know about it, the better, right? And that's the way it would work. Because you would hate to be like, let's say, a business owner that had dreams and aspirations, but just didn't simply know how to get everything going and align the resources. 5 years, 10 years later, you could have started that business maybe 3 years earlier if you knew, right? That those are the types of things that I think that a lot of people need to be up to speed on too, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Now, let me ask you another question though, because
Sure.
I know you don't know, you can't speak specifically of that $220 million that the government announced in September on that
Sure.
program. But the SBL, that's really interesting. Well, I don't know what you call it. You had a different name for it.
Yeah.
How, so when they say they put up 90%, so is that the business owners basically got to put up the 10%? Is that what it is? Is it
That's right. Yeah, yeah. So for
10%?
certain types of businesses, right? So it's a little bit different. Let's say for like a higher risk business, like a restaurant.
Yeah,
So a higher risk business like a restaurant, I think the client needs to now put in 33%
33. Okay.
versus, like, let's say a retail operation, let's say a clothing store, for example, or let's say a barber shop, for example, pre-COVID, where it would be 10%.
Oh,
So the government comes in and kind of provides that guarantee to the banks, and says, okay, listen, the bank, your risk is less by lending this money out. And that's kind of how it works. So it's a really great program. Now, every bank has its own qualification standards. So RBC versus, like, let's say another bank like a BMO have different qualification standards as it relates to, how they qualify. So the government says to all the banks, it's your underwriting and it's your analysis of qualifications that dictate this guarantee, right? So, every bank has a different sort of qualification standard. So a lot of the times, like, even though it's only 10% that they got to put into the deal, like in terms of the financing, the rest is done via 90%. The client still needs to show ultimately that they have like a net worth, for example,
for
that
sure.
supports it in the event of default or whatever that might be,
For
right?
sure.
So, the different sort of things that kind of come with the equation there. So yeah.
So let me ask you a question. So every
Mhm.
bank will have their own qualification or their focus area. Does RBC have a set focus areas? Like, for example, they like this type of business versus that, or
Like, I think it changes all the time, and I'll be honest with you, like, you see industry trends and industry insights change. And I've been, like, in banking now 17 years. Now, the first part of my career I was in personal banking, so it was a little bit less relevant, but definitely in business banking, those industries and trends change with the industry, right? Just simple. So an example would be, starting up a restaurant in the midst of COVID with a dining room that, has 100 people. You know, I'm not too sure. Like, I mean, even for the business owner, you may want to ask them, you might not want to consider that. Maybe not right now, maybe to consider it later, right? Whereas you're still seeing like, restaurants that we're working with that have kind of adapted and they're figuring it out. Like, hey, let's look at a small imprint where there can be some very effective takeout and delivery, no seated space, and we can make X amount of revenue through, Uber Eats or, skip the dishes or whatever. That, right, not only is thriving now, but can also thrive after, because that's just been the trend of how consumers like to eat out, right? So, it's just one of those things where industries, they do absolutely change just based on, what's relevant.
Let me ask you that. Based upon that, let's take that to the next step.
Yeah.
What trends or type of business are you seeing really start to thrive now and really getting some real traction within the banks?
Yeah, so you're seeing some great traction, IT related companies. Like we talked about digitizing, and that's kind of related to banking, but digitizing and IT related businesses, like, so, software, and also, IT consultants. Now, the reality is that these types of businesses are not capital heavy. They don't need a lot of capital or loans and financing because, they produce their good. It's not like they need to get inventory and raw materials. So we're seeing a lot of thriving sort of businesses along that path, like just growth. Um, Manufacturers. So we're seeing a lot of manufacturing, probably in the other end of the higher spectrum of the commercial market, depending on what you're aligned to. So, specifically food service companies. Like, I don't know if you've been to the grocery store lately, but you see, anybody who has that sort of license to sell groceries, and, and at the higher level, like the food manufacturers, like in terms of what they're making, those products doing extremely well. So food and beverage, right? Very, very much at a growth phase right now. We're seeing that.
Okay.
And like I was going back to the manufacturers. So it's not just about, hey, those manufacturers that are doing PPE, because that could be short term,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because like what's going to happen in a year now when that PPE contract runs out? Yeah, we're seeing that. I just think that, it all depends on how people are consuming things, right? It's just that, it's definitely, the highest impact it has just been simply retail, and it's unfortunate, right? Some of the tough things that, retailers are going through, right? It's just that it's just been very, very difficult for that industry.
Well, let me ask you this. So what do you advise in terms of companies that were in the service industry have are hit very hard, their doors are closed for whatever reason?
Yeah.
Is it that for them to are you finding a lot of them are just keeping their doors closed and plan to reopen later on? Is it that they're planning to come out next year? Like, what are you seeing? Can you
Well, I think at the onset of, yeah, at the onset of COVID, I think that what we saw a lot of is that, hey, you know what, this is very short term. Things are going to go back to normal quickly. But I think that we're very short sighted, obviously, right? But as things progressed, this is where things like, cash flow planning becomes so important. If you want to sustain and you think that you're going to come out of this, let's say when, even if you achieve a level of, 60% of revenues pre-COVID, how are you going to do it? Right. So the question is that things need to change, like a lot of things need to change, right? So, and I think that the business owners and entrepreneurs have done a fantastic job of understanding, things need to change. If we're going to occupy a retail space and the rent's going to be X amount, that may not change in negotiating with their landlord, then other things need to change. Like they're ultimately understanding what their expenses are and everything like that. So, and I mean, there's some very difficult decisions I'm assuming that some entrepreneurs are going through right now, right? How sustainable is it? How long can we wait? What are our options? So, I know that, you never want to see that sad news story, but I think that, ultimately at the end of the day, the entrepreneurs have to make a decision of whether it's sustainable for the months to come versus, can they weather the storm and then kind of get out there with a plan, right?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you this, man. Look, Gareth, I say you've definitely shared some good insights. Yeah, I definitely appreciate the knowledge and the links you shared as well. Um, I'm about to shut it down. If anyone has any last questions, speak now. As we were saying, you unmute your mic and just come on. Any last questions? Because we're about to let you go. But Gareth, thanks, man. You know what? As I said, oftentimes it's I find a lot of companies and my challenge is a lot of them want to go back to operations just like it was pre-COVID. I keep saying, listen, you know what? I
Mm-hmm.
think you've really got to learn to pivot because how you operated last year, this time, that model doesn't work anymore. You know, the horse and buggy, it was great. And I couldn't care less how great your horse and buggy is. Once that tractor comes in, we're not going back to horse and buggy.
Yeah.
And is that mindset, as I really think, is something that really got to be pervasive through. But you
Yeah.
know, we'll see, we'll see. But I saw last opportunity. With that said, Gareth, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you coming out.
Thank you so much, Anton. It was a pleasure to be here. Thanks
All
again.
right,
Take care.
take care.
Bye now.
To all, thank you for coming. Again, I'll see you next Tuesday, same time, Tuesday at 2 to 3. Tonight, don't forget, we have Boss Women program at 6 o'clock going on. That's for women entrepreneurs. Tomorrow, Wednesday, 12 to 1 o'clock, we'll have Ask the Professional series, which I'll be hosting again. And we'll be talking to the community as well. For the rest of you, until next week, enjoy. Be safe. Take care, all.